Dienstag ist Dilemmatag. This time we're having a look at a very interesting dilemma combo that can win or lose you the game immediately. Let's go into Lucky. As you can see here, we are looking at a more complex setup. This time we're not just looking at the mission we're attempting at the dilemmas, but we're also interested in the rest of the table. So we are on the right side here, we are playing Voyager, we are in the Delta Quadrant. Our opponent is far away from us in the Alpha Quadrant. You can see that they have spent the first couple of turns playing a Bajoran Freighter, Morn, and Lita hanging out at Quark's Bar. There's a Bajoran Resistance guy on the planet, as you would expect. And they are running, for example, the alternate universe door, a QS tent, and also the rarely seen Q Flash these days, as well as a couple of hidden agendas. Now, we, on the other hand, we have managed to put a super crew into play on our first couple of turns. We have the entire Voyager bridge crew, Janeway, Chakotay, and all the rest. We have 7 of 9 instead of Kiss. So apparently we have the personal advantage here, so why not attempt a mission then? We fly Voyager over to the space mission here, and we attempt it with our mega crew. The first dilemma is the clown Bitter Medicine. Now, this dilemma is one that originally came out in the second edition set Fractured Time, but it was backwards compatible, and it has since been turned into a proper first edition dilemma. Placed on mission, now at start of each mission attempt or scouting attempt, opponent names a skill. All your personnel with that skill are attributes -2 until the end of the turn. So it's placed on the mission, our opponent gets to name a skill, and then all our guys with that skill lose some of their attributes. And for each new attempt, the opponent can do this again and potentially choose a different skill next time. So we are playing against a crafty opponent who has been watching the personnel we have put in play, and he decides to name leadership. So it doesn't do anything to stop us, so let's have a look at the next dilemma. Now there's a strange one. Chula the way home. To get past 3 personnel present are chosen. Opponent may relocate one to Quark's Bar or your facility if the other 2 have combined integrity less than 15. Okay, so let's randomly select 3 personnel. We'll take the 3 left ones after we've shuffled this crew here. So they are Neelix, Harry Kim, and Tuvok. Now the dilemma says that if any 2 of those have integrity less than 15, the opponent may relocate the 3rd one to Quark's Bar. So, for example, we have Harry Kim and Neelix, whose total integrity is a combined 13, meaning we could, for example, relocate Tuvok to Quark's Bar to hang out with Morn and Lita. If we look at Harry Kim and Tuvok, for example, they would combine for integrity 15 if we look at the printed attributes, but because of the -2 that the opponent gets from Bitter Medicine, Tuvok, who is affected because he has leadership, is actually only a 6 integrity in this scenario, so even choosing these 2 and then relocating Neelix would work. So apparently the relocation here is successful. Again, this dilemma doesn't anything to stop the attempt, so we continue. And the last dilemma, or not dilemma in this case, it's a doorway, is a Q Flash. Now, Q Flash isn't often played because it's very random in the effects that it can have. But in this case, our opponent doesn't go for randomness because all the Q cards in the Q Flash are copies of the same card. In this case, it is Vicious Patriotism. You must immediately initiate a battle at one location that has opposing ships or away teams, if any. Stopped cards are unstopped long enough to battle if no leaders are required and no affiliation restrictions apply. So, our opponent has managed to put one of our personnel present with one of theirs. So Neelix, despite being Federation, must attack because no Federation affiliation attack restrictions apply, and he doesn't even have to be a leader in order to initiate this battle. So Neelix has to battle immediately in the middle of the mission attempt. And of course he does that, and Morn and Lita together will beat him up. But that's not the important thing, because as soon as we initiate this battle here, our opponent will flip Defend Homeworld. And it reads, when opponent initiates battle against your card at a homeworld matching that card's affiliation, Lita is Bajoran. She is at Deep Space Nine, which is seated at the Bajoran homeworld. Then our opponent gets to do a number of things. Just after it is targeted, you may download there any number of HQ cards and compatible ships and leaders and security personnel and hand weapons. We'll look at that in a moment. We can just finish the mission attempt. This is the only Q card that we've encountered. All the other copies are also issue of is patriotism. So our crew then gets to check whether they have the mission requirements. Astrophysics, biology, and navigation ×2 is not a problem for that crew. So they complete that mission. And then our opponent flips the mission debriefing, meaning all the guys here are stopped when the mission attempt ends. Without anything else to do, we then have to pass the turn over to our opponent. It was successful. We had a mission done, but now we have to give the turn back to our opponent. And now let's have a look at what he has downloaded with Defend Homeworld. It says you may download any number of HQ cards and compatible ships, leaders, security personnel, and hand weapons. There is no limit to it whatsoever. So among the things that our opponent in this scenario will likely download are, for example, HQ cards like HQ War Room, which gives personnel that have officer, security, leadership, and resistance a cunning and strength boost. He will download leaders like Shaka Idon, security personnel like Odo, leadership personnel that might have other useful skills like the Universal Minister Roxanne, or Roxanne, but most people I've seen call her Roxanne every time. And she's universal, so you can download multiple copies of her. You can not only download Bajorans, but also compatible personnel. So in this case, non-alliance, or if you have a treaty out, guys that match the treaty. We can use Killhorse lore. We can bring in people from other eras, like Joachim. Defend Homeworld doesn't say anything about quadrant restrictions. It says you may download there. It gives us a target. We are not limited by any quadrant reporting restrictions. So we can also bring in the mirror version of Odo. We can bring in the mirror version of Baral, who has security. We can bring in mirror Esri, who has leadership. We can bring in Delta personnel, like Maxwell Burke. We can bring in any number of hand weapons we want. We can bring in any number of compatible ships like the Delta Quadrant Tsunkatsu ship or the Delta Quadrant USS Download that has a quadrant of quantum slipstream drive that allows it to move along the space line. We can bring in the big freaking Bajoran warships. And as I said, there is no limit. In the most recent World Championship in 2019, a deck like this that forced the opponent to attack you was played on day one. Out of the 5 games it was played in, it won 4 because it only needed that one turn. It needed the opponent to trigger that forced Defend Homeworld download, and then it downloaded more or less the entire deck. About 100 personnel, about 25 ships, and once the turn went over to them, it was pretty much game over, because with so many resources in play, they were free to attempt missions as often as they could. So you can start out by playing a ship with only one personnel, sending it in for a red shirt attempt, then assemble the crew you need to beat that dilemma, then assemble another crew to beat the next dilemma, and so on, because the resources are enough to attempt 4 or 5 missions several times. So there are very good chances that on this one turn, because of the sheer number of personnel and ships you have in play, you can complete 3 missions for 100 points. Sometimes you even have enough resources to simply run out the clock, not because that is your intention, but because you have so much to do on your turn that the minutes just fly by and you realize that you have run out of time at some point. And if the opponent happens to be in the Alpha Quadrant 2, then of course with all those ships and those hand weapons you can download, you can also try and attack them and just wipe them out. Just look at the 3 ships we have here, and you can easily have, as I said, 10 or 12 or 20 ships. And if you are in range, that could be one of the problems that keeps you down a little bit. If you are in range, you can then fly over to your opponent's facilities and just attack them and make sure you have the board to yourself. Of course, the price for this is that this dilemma combo does not really protect the mission. And in order to trigger this, as many missions as possible have to be seeded with a combo that can trigger this forced attack. There are 4 combos that can force this attack pretty reliably. A 5th mission can usually be closed with a dead end, and so the chances are very good that you can, as the veteran player here, you can trigger this forced attack before your opponent has finished the game. If you see a deck like this coming, if you see a Q flash on the table, and maybe even the Beware of Q card, and you see that your opponent has a very big stack of cards, then you need to be prepared for this. Apart from the Chula the Way Home, there is also Chula the Abyss that can relocate your personnel. There are also the love interest dilemmas that can relocate to the furthest planet. In this case, our opponent has seeded cleverly that the veteran homeworld is the furthest planet if we were in the Alpha Quadrant. Our Delta personnel would be safe from love interest relocations. There are a couple of ways to play around it. If you know the requirements on this dilemma and on Chula the Abyss, then you can sometimes assemble a crew that manages to fulfill all the requirements you need, no matter who is selected. If you redshirt or redship into this dilemma with a single personnel, you would not get past because you need 3 personnel at least, but then you would see this dilemma and you could plan accordingly. And also, if you run lots of holograms, that also gives you some protection, because the holograms cannot be relocated if there is no holodeck at the location they need to report to. And Quark's Bar does not have a holodeck. Maybe an adjacent holosuite would have one, but you couldn't simply relocate the hologram there, so that effect would fizzle. So there are ways to play around it. But if you haven't seen this before, chances are that you run into this unprepared, and then you will just end up watching your opponent for 45 or 60 minutes, downloading their entire deck and just attempting missions until they have what it needs. That's it for today. Until next time, bye bye.